Hello, good evening, and welcome to Journeys in Faith here on the Anne DeSantis YouTube channel. And I am excited for all of you because I have another amazing guest for you on this Friday evening. I have Dan Donaldson with Heroic Men, and I'm happy for you all to find out about this great mission of his. And he has many new things happening in the ministry as well. Dan, welcome. Thanks for joining me on this program.
It's an honor to be with you, Anne. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So, shows called Journeys in Faith, and all the time we interview people about their faith journey. So, we definitely want to hear about the heroic men and all the great things happening. But perhaps we can just start out with a little bit about you and your faith journey. Love to hear.
Thanks for asking. It's been quite the journey. So I'm born and raised in Walla Walla, Washington, and I am the son of Margaret and Jim Buchan. My biological dad left my mom when she was pregnant with me, and I was their fifth child. And so my mom was a single mommy for 4 years before she married my dad, Jim, who raised me. And he was, he inherited an insta family of five kids. And but he wasn't Catholic. My mom was actually, she had me baptized, but wasn't practicing at all. And my dad, when I was in the fourth grade, he felt called to become Catholic and join the church and raise our family Catholic, and had a pretty major conversion in his life. And the following year, my parents put me in Catholic school. Well, up until that time, I'd never, to my recollection, ever attended Mass. Not even on Christmas and Easter do I remember that. So they did this mass thing at school every week, and I was completely clueless. And so I was a little embarrassed by that. And to try to figure that out, I learned that they did this mass thing always every morning at the parish right next door. So I started riding my bike to school early and attending daily mass. And the priest, Father Caffrey, um, saw me there and saw me showing up every day, and he said, "Gosh, you're here every morning. Would you be interested in being an altar server?" And I said, "Well, sure." I had no clue uh, what to do or what it was all about. I hadn't even received my sacraments yet, so he figured that out really quickly and got that corrected. Um, but it's a good example. St. Augustine writes that our hearts are restless until they rest in God. And that is definitely my story. And as I progressed through Catholic school, I'll never forget. So our faith lives, oftentimes there's ebbs and flows to them, and that's definitely been my story as well. And I really drifted a lot. I'll never forget in the eighth grade, I was at a school mass, sitting next to one of my best friend who was not Catholic. I was bored, I was disengaged. And when mass got over and the final blessing was said, the mass is ended, go in peace. I said, "Thanks be to God, that's over." And my friend James looked at me and he said, "Shame on you." And he stood up and he walked away. And I'll never forget that. Uh, his boldness, and he called me out. And I'm glad that he did. And now today he's a faithful Catholic man, raising his family Catholic. He's an amazing, incredible man. Um, but life continued on, again, ebbs and flows. And I went to college and really drifted, and lived a pretty dissolute life. Um, and I played sports in college. I played baseball, and um, uh, I was really just not engaged with my faith at all. And I was actually at a college party, and um, a young lady walked through the doors, and one of my friends made a pass at her. I didn't see the girl, but she said to this guy, "I wouldn't do such a thing. I'm a good Catholic girl." And my head snapped around, and I saw the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen, and didn't really talk to her that night, but I found out where she worked, and I made a beeline there the next day. I embarrassed myself and got her number and asked her out. And a week later, and this was crazy wild Dan. Nobody would have guessed this, especially me. But a week later, I told her that I loved her and I was going to marry her. And a year later, I did. We were still in college when we got married, um, and she came from this extraordinary Catholic family, but we were not practicing our faith. And the only time that we would go to mass on Sundays was when her father would actually invite us to a breakfast afterward. Um, and I'm not proud of any of this, but it is my story. Um, and so when I graduated from school, we moved away. I started teaching high school in Oregon. And while I was teaching, I got involved with some business people to make some extra money. And these folks happened to be evangelical Christians that really loved the Lord. And they talked about Jesus in a way that I'd never heard before. They talked about him like they knew him, like he was their friend. And it really intrigued me, and they would invite us to Bible studies, they'd invite us to services, and at these services, there would always be an altar call where people would be invited to give their life to Jesus. And I saw this happen several times and attended a service, and um, the altar call was made, and I thought to myself, I don't know that I've ever really done that. I haven't given my life to God. I haven't given my life to Jesus Christ. And the preacher was a pretty black and white preacher. And that day he said, you're either for God or you're against him. You need to choose. And I thought, okay, I choose. And I stood up and I walked forward. He he said, "I haven't made the altar call yet." um, but Andrea came with me, and we walked up, and we really made a commitment to Jesus Christ that day, and it was it's pretty radical for us. For me, I walked outside the doors of that building, and the world looked different. It was brighter. It wasn't as gray. I was blown away. And we were told to go find a Bible believing church. Unfortunately, we didn't go back to the Bible Church, which is the Catholic Church. That's where the canon of Scripture comes from. We started doing some church hopping, and we wound up at a Baptist church. Um, and we immediately got super involved. Andrea got involved in a mommy's group. I got involved in a men's group, and then we did a couples Bible study together. Our kids were involved, and we would attend these Bible studies together. And often in these Bible studies, people would just ask for intercession. There would be intercessory prayer, and people would ask for prayers for their mother, brother, cousin, sister, friend, because they're Catholic. And my wife thought, well, what's wrong with Catholic? She was from an amazing Catholic family, incredibly Christ filled people, loved the Lord, totally saintly people, especially her grandfather, amazing, amazing heritage. And so she started to investigate. And she started to listen to Catholic radio, read books, listen to CDs, and she was really blown away. And she would hand me CDs and give me books, and she said, "Man, Dan, I think we're really missing out here. We're missing out on the fullness of Christianity." And I thought, that fullness? What do you mean? I was so on fire, I was really growing in my faith. It just went right over my head, and we really started to fight about it. It became a major issue in our marriage. She would take me to Father Richard. I would drag her to Pastor Phil, and it just we were really beating our heads together and just couldn't figure things out. And one evening, we got on our knees and said, Lord, we can't figure out a resolution, nor let alone a compromise. Please help us. I'll never forget that prayer. The next day, we agreed just to go to counseling. So I started calling counselors, and I got a hold of a gentleman that said, yes, I counsel from a Christian perspective. I was born and raised Catholic. I went to the seminary, but I've left the church and I'm now at this evangelical church. And I thought, Lord, you answer prayer. This guy's going to fix Andrea. This is amazing. Your answer is immediate. And I never told her what the conversation was like. I just scheduled the appointment, and we went a few days later and visited with this gentleman. And when we got there, the issue came right out. And he looked me in the eyes and he said, Dan, what's your problem? The Catholic Church is a Christian church. And I don't know if you've ever seen a dog that heard a new noise, but that was me. Um, I was, I thought, man, I didn't expect that. I expected him to point out to Andrea all the problems. And no, actually, the Lord used him to open my mind. And that's when I started to listen to the CDs that Andrea gave me that I formerly was throwing out my car window. I started to read the books. I started to have conversations with Father Richard. I started to really investigate. It didn't. A lot of my objections started to fall, such as common objections like the Catholics worship Mary. We don't. We honor and venerate her. We and Just lots and lots of issues, but all started to fall. But my last issue was the Eucharist. I thought that um, either the Catholic Church is completely on the money, and it's true what they say that it is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, or it's a heinous lie. Because how could you worship a piece of bread? And of course, we don't worship a piece of bread. We worship the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus in the Eucharist. But that was a major, major issue for me. And I was reading about it, I was talking to folks, and I came home one night, and our oldest son was 10 at the time, and he was on the couch with the Bible in his lap, and he was crying. And I said, Jacob, what's wrong? He said, Papa, it says right here that I don't have life in me. He was reading the 6th chapter of the Gospel of John, when Jesus said, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life in you. And my 10-year-old read that passage and understood it. The 33-year-old, me at that time, didn't until then. When God used the mouth of the babe to open up my mind and heart again. So I shortly thereafter went to Father Richard, and he said, "You're ready, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, Father, I'm ready." He said, "Great." And he put on his stole. He said, "Let's go to confession then." He walked me into the confessional. He heard my confession, and he welcomed me back to the Catholic Church. And Andrea and I received the Eucharist that Sunday for the first time in over a decade. And we were crying like babies, and our life has never been the same, and it keeps getting better and better and better, and our faith continues to grow. And that's just the beginning of the story. But that's the most important part.
Wow. I have to admit, I mean, I did my investigating on, admittedly, I just met you today online and we set up this podcast and we were communicating via email, but I did not know the full scope of your story. So, as my audience is, gasping and like, wow, this is amazing. Same thing for me. I'm amazed and I'm excited to hear the rest of your story and also to hear about heroic men and the great work that you're doing. We do have to take a really quick, and I mean quick break. So we'll be back in just a few. Hello, this is Anne DeSantis. I'm an author and speaker with the Catholic Speakers Organization. To learn about my work and ministry or to book an event, visit the speaking events page at annedesantis.com. Thank you. Wow. Again, what a story. I would love for you to pick up where you left off and then lead us into how did you get into heroic men? And I know you have a call to action. You're working with Father Larry
Sure.
Richards. So maybe we could
Yes.
start there just as we came back from the break, and then we can pick up with the story. Tell what is going on with between you and Father and the ministry there.
Well, a quick executive summary about Heroic Men. Heroic Men exists to help men grow in faith and Christ centered brotherhood with one another. I would just ask and invite all of your audience to remember this statistic that I'm going to share with you right now. 31% of Catholic men that go to Mass on Sundays do not have one close personal friend. That is from a survey that was done 10 years ago by the New Evangelization Project. You can Google that and check it out. It was an amazing survey done across the United States at hundreds of different parishes among 1,400 faithful Catholic men that go to Mass on Sundays. And it really proved that we have a massive problem on our hands. And it's a problem of isolation and loneliness. And so 1/3 of men that you will sit next to in Mass this Sunday, at minimum, okay, remember that was 10 years ago, before COVID, okay? 1/3 of the men that you'll see at Mass on Sundays do not have one close personal friend. And so heroic men exist to help them, to reach them, and help them grow in brotherhood with other men, uh, so that we can become the men that Christ has called us to be. Okay, so heroic men, what our objective is to help grow dynamic, multiplying men's groups at parishes throughout the US and Canada and beyond. And we provide all of the resources to do that. You can check us out at heroicmen.org. There is no cost to any of our resources. There's no cost to anything that we do to help you to grow in your spiritual life and and to learn everything that you need to ignite or grow your existing men's group. And I mean by ignite, start a men's group or grow your existing one and multiply it. And what we are doing, what we've just completed filming of, is a video series with Father Larry Richards based upon his book, Be a Man. That is a best selling book. It's sold tens of thousands of copies. We believe it is one of the premier books and guidebooks on masculine spirituality, about how we need to be servant leaders and deeply focused on Jesus Christ and have a divine intimacy with him in serving our families, serving our parishes, serving our communities. It is an outstanding book. We're going to come out with a video series that corresponds with that book. It'll be launched May 1st, and we want to invite men to definitely check out that series, but not just check out that series, use it with other men to get into conversation and to grow in faith and Christ-centered brotherhood together with one another. With that series and the dozens of other series that we have on our Heroic Men platform.
Amazing. I'm excited to tell my husband about this because he's involved in two men's groups. One is an online men's group, and then the other one is a Friday morning one that he does, a prayer meeting. And so it's great. I want to invite people to, yeah, that's right. I want to invite people to investigate it by going to heroicmen.org. Now, you were in the middle of kind of like telling that story. You were at a certain point. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to make
Oh,
sure that we got that in there
yeah,
about what's going on. So, did you want to pick up with like just where things are now, like in terms of
sure.
you had that deep conversion, your family Tell us more about that
I'll
and
pick up where I
how
left
your
off. That
families
was
Yeah,
I'll
please
pick up
do.
where I left off. When we had that conversion experience, and conversion isn't a one-time deal. It's a lifelong process. So I'm still undergoing conversion. I'm still a work in progress, thanks be to God. We all are. And it's so exciting to know that we can grow each and every day closer to God and grow in our relationship with Him. So in 2003, we came back to the church. At that time, I was working a great corporate career. I worked in the pharmaceutical industry in sales and leadership roles, and was moving all over the country. I was very blessed to be a part of some very large organizations, and specialized in endocrinology and diabetes. And really, I, uh, I we were providing products that improved people's lives. I was proud of what I did. And what as things went along, we moved all over the country. We actually moved 3 times across the country in 3.5 years. With my career, because it was moving very quickly, and we wound up in Denver, Colorado, in 2007, which is still where we reside today. When we showed up in Denver, we would pick our parish wherever we move. We pick our parish first, and then we pick our home, because we realized that we weren't with family, and our family was going to be our parish community. So we were a homeschooling family at that time, and um, although we were super involved with our faith, I want to be straight up with everybody too, and say I was still kind of living a double life. In my corporate career, I was traveling a lot. There were lots of meetings, lots of corporate affairs, and there was also always free flowing alcohol, and I was drinking a lot, and it was really impacting me, and my life. And so I would go off and be one person in my corporate life and be another when I came home. Again, not proud to say that, but God is amazing. And in 2007, when we moved to Denver, I was invited 7 times by the same guy to come check out his men's group. I declined 6 times, not because I wasn't interested, but because I was really busy. I was traveling all over. But the seventh time I went, and it wasn't to, it was really more to just get him off my back. And I said, Jeff, yeah, okay, I'll come, and I did. And what I found is that there were men just like me there, men that were busy, that were raising their families, they were doing their best just to make a living and provide for their families. They were trying to, but they were trying to live out their faith, and they were actually vulnerable with one another and sharing the challenges that they were having. And I realized I wasn't alone, and up until that point I was one of those 31%. I was lonely. I did not have one close personal friend, and those men changed my life, because I saw men that, again, they were having the same kind of struggles that I was, but they were trying also to follow the Lord's leading in their life, and it inspired me. I wanted to be more like them. And it really helped me to grow in my faith and start to make the changes that I needed to make. And in fact, in 2010, I stopped drinking in 2010, January of 2010, and I haven't taken a sip since. And I owe a lot of that to the men that I was surrounded with, that would encourage me, and that encouraged me and lifted me up in my faith. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25 says, let us consider how to lift up one another to love and good works, not forsaking the gathering together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging each other, and all the more as we see the day drawing near. Here's Dan's translation. Bros need bros. and we need each other to lift one another up, to encourage each other, to go through life together, and not just to get together and have a beer or grab a coffee just to talk about life, but to talk about life in the context of faith. And faith is a joyful experience. It's the greatest way to live your life. And when you're living with other guys that are living a full and abundant life, it makes things amazing. So life continued on, it was growing in my faith. In 2015, I learned that the pharma company that I was working for started doing human embryonic stem cell research
Mhm.
that kills babies.
Yeah.
And I knew that I couldn't participate in that. I began a novena to St. Joseph the Worker. In the middle of that novena, I was at the Augustine Institute, where I would go to daily mass at noon when I was in town. And I was working on my resume in their cafe after mass, and their president, Dr. Tim Gray, came up to me and said, "What you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm working on." Yeah, I knew Tim; he was a friend of mine. I coached his son in baseball for 6 years, and he said, "Wow, that's interesting. We're actually merging with Lighthouse Catholic Media and launching this thing called Formed. Would you be interested in coming to help us?"
Oh, boy. Hey, that worked out.
I joined the Augustine Institute,
Yeah.
got to oversee the launch of Formed for 5 years,
Mm.
and was part. It's the largest online Catholic platform, and I was really proud to be a part of that. After that, I went to work with Chris Stefanik at Real Life Catholic. I was his first board member. Our families actually raised our kids together. He was one of those homeschooling families that we met when we moved to Denver in 2007. But I joined him in 2020, helped him grow his organization for a couple of years to reach more people for Jesus Christ. And in 2022, I was invited by Heroic Men to come on board and lead their organization to help men grow in faith and Christ centered brotherhood.
Wow, what a story. I have to admit, as we were going into the podcast, with each bit of the story, I'm more amazed at how God has worked in your life, and I want to
Yeah.
invite people. I want to invite my audience to go to that website, go to heroicmen.org, search them out on all the social media channels, on YouTube, wherever they need to connect with you and with this beautiful ministry. Before we end, is there anything in particular that you want to end with? Any type of call to action or anything else?
Yes. Here's a call to action for every one of your members of your audience. I want to encourage you this Sunday when you go to mass, sit in a different spot.
Mm,
Okay. That might feel a little uncomfortable, but I want to encourage you to sit in a different spot. I want to encourage you during Mass to introduce yourself to somebody that you may not know that well. If it's a guy, I want you to introduce yourself to another man. And I want to encourage you, don't just invite him to your men's group. Okay. That's going to be important. That you'll get there down the road. Invite him to coffee or invite him to
mm,
grab a beer. Say, "Hey, I'd love to get to know you a bit. Would you be interested in going to coffee sometime?" Make a friend.
mm. Oh, I
We
love
need
that.
authentic friendship with one another.
Mm,
Make a friend, grow in friendship. And what if we all did that just once a month?
Men and women, right? I mean, think about it.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. I love that. I like having you on this program, and I would
Thank
like
you.
to have you back sometime.
I'd be honored.
Yes, I appreciate it. Thank you. Uh, Dan, thank you again for being a guest on this program.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on. It's been an honor and blessing, and I just wish blessings upon you and your entire audience.
Thank you. And to everyone who's watching, if you can like and subscribe to the Anne DeSantis YouTube channel. Our show airs on the first and third Friday of every month at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. God bless, and we'll see you next time.